be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Eric, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge.
And welcome to Tinfoil Hat. You know who I am. You know what I'm here to do. I'm here to rock, man. You got slow on that one. Joining me, as always, is my good friend, my partner in crime, one of my favorite people on the planet, the man, the myth, the legend, Xavier Guerrero, XG, the place to be. And on the ones and twos, Johnny the intern, everybody. Johnny Woodard, everybody.
Very much.
Hey, thank you, dude, for joining us on another exciting show. I mean, we're just doing nothing but hitters on the show lately, and today's episode will be no different than that. I'm gonna be honest with you. The last time I did a show with these two guys, it always changes the way I think about the world we live in, and that is like, I mean, I learned talking to these guys last time. What is up is really down, and there's been this giant, movement to just give us nothing but misinformation, so we don't know what's really going on in this world. And luckily, these gentlemen are two guys that who do deep dives on this and kind of can help us, navigate the murky waters that is the ancient knowledge. Joining us, he's a regular on my Patreon, and he's a good friend of mine. He's done live tinfoil hats. He's from the Conspiracy Forum. Jeffery Wilson, everybody.
Greetings, salutations, man. Thanks for having me on.
And
Happy New Year, and thank you, and welcome to fatherhood, my friend.
Hey, I'm so excited, dude. I can do the butt wipings. I can do the vajayjay wipings. I can do the feeding. I hate the burping, and that's a whole nother show.
It's only just begun, my friend.
It's only just begun. This next gentleman is talk about blowing minds. I mean, I've never met one man who's done more research. He's an ancient history researcher and writer. His website is stageoftime.com. Welcome back. One of the best to do it out there, my friend and yours, Matt LaCroix. How are you, brother?
Hey, Sam. It's great to be back again here, and it's awesome to be here with you too, Jeffrey. We always have a nice, little back and forth trying to figure out, like Sam said, navigating these murky wires to try to understand what the truth is.
Perfect.
And by the way, Sam, congratulations.
Thank you, dude. I'm very excited. Ghost and Ninja are both healthy, wealthy, and wise, and I cannot complain. I'm very excited. Matt, what have you been up to since we last talked? I mean, you've been you've been doing amazing things. What's new?
So last time we talked was actually 9 months ago. So that's a pretty good amount of time. And in that time, I finalized and released, with the help of Jeffery Wilson, who was on my release day, the latest book I wrote called The Stage of Time, which you mentioned about the website. And that was a compilation of all of the years that I've been researching. And, when we had did those 3-part shows before, the first 3 podcasts, where we talked about
equal, the serpent, the ancient knowledge. You just changed the way I looked at everything, dude.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
I put out this is my thing, and that's serpents. When I take pictures, everybody has, they're kind of like, Dane Cook had super finger. I have serpents. This is my thing. So when I take pictures, I throw out the serpents because it's serpents versus eagles. And it's changed the paradigm in my head on how I think about everything.
That's amazing. It's really it's quite an honor to change someone's perspective about things in reality like that, and how we perceive all of these symbols and things that have happened in our past. So I really appreciate that, Sam.
Well, I'm happy. We talked 9 months ago. I just had a kid. Maybe your episode was so exciting that I said, you know what? I'm ready to bring some more knowledge to some more people. Let's make some more knowledge. So, Matt, dude, congratulations, dude. You are,
Thanks,
you're like one of those crooners that everybody makes love to, dude. Your knowledge is so good that everyone on your podcast as you talk about eagle versus serpent. So where do you want to start, Matt? Where would you? I like to just sit back and kind of hear what you have to say. Where would you like to start on today's episode?
All right. So last time we covered this inversion of, these symbols across the world, this eagle versus serpent. We talked a lot about the Americas and the conquering of the Americas. And I think today what I want to focus on is, and Jeffrey Wilson and I have been discussing this and really trying to coordinate how we want to approach this, but the broader idea of archaeological wars, and I think in the deception and hiding of the ancient past. And I think that's going to be something right up your alley, because you know all about, the things that occurred in Iraq and all these lies that we were fed about, why they were just ransacking the Iraqi museum right after, and all these things were disappearing.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna discuss Iraq, Syria, and Iran. We're gonna try to bring this whole thing in, because really this is the heart of the ancient world.
And honestly, if I may interject before he goes off, I mean, this is so beautiful about the timeline of all of this. Like Sam, like you and I with our shows, it's more modern days of deconstructing these false narratives. And what Matthew does, he goes back hundreds of thousands into antiquity to deconstruct these false narratives. So the crazy thing is, nothing is new under the sun. And here we are deconstructing these false narratives with the implications that are just way huger than I think people realize. Go ahead, Matthew.
I agree with, you know what, Matt, the more and more I study this stuff, the more and more I think the whole thing about oil, and we're in the Middle East about oil, is all just BS, to just be like, it's just a cover that they're just trying to go in there and they're just trying to get all the ancient knowledge, get all the ancient, like, ritual tribal areas that Mesopotamia was, when your whole thing on the Anunnaki blew my mind. I'm trying to, I really, after talking to you, I do believe that there's an Anunnaki out there. I'm just trying to fit that into simulation and multiple dimensions and all that stuff, and how that can all work. But, Mesopotamia, and that's just, that whole area is just ancient knowledge. And that's, when we talk about, and we're going to get into it, when they go in and the first thing they do is they're not going after nuclear weapons, they're going after museums in Iraq. Like, why are they doing that? Because they're there for the ancient knowledge. And that's 100%, I believe, the real reason they're behind. Everything else is, there's some business stuff, but that's secondary to just controlling what the truth is out there. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say, guys.
Well, and before Matt goes off again, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear it because just as the Library of Antiquities were jacked when we went into Iraq, that's exactly what Alexander did when he went to Persepolis, or the burnings and the lootings of the Library of Alexandria. Again, these are these methods to obscure what's really going on so they can feed us this false narrative. But again, nothing's new under the sun.
Well said, Jeffrey. That's a great lead in, Sam. So that's what we're talking about here is, well, what if the story we've been told in our history books is inaccurate? What if it's not the truth? What if human history, the story behind civilizations rising and falling, goes back far further than we've been told? And on the first show, we covered the Sumerian king list that Sam had his mind blown by, because we're getting dates of some of these ancient kings and cities that are more than double the age that we're told. So just to start the whole narrative out, so we're all on the same playing field here. If you were to, like Sam just did, have a child, and that child goes into school and they're learning about ancient history, and they have this book in front of them that's called The History Doctrine, taught to you by the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
They would open that up and they would read about, oh, well, human civilization is only 6,000 years old. Before that, it was hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes. That's the story we're told. This is this false narrative that all of our accomplishments can only go back to 6,000 years ago. Whereas what we're going to cover are the idea that there are multiple epochs of civilizations that have come and gone, risen and fallen, because of war and greed and all this battling over who's going to essentially rule over these great regions, and even some of these gods that you mentioned. Sam had his mind blown during the first few episodes talking about what the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, some of these winged gods that seem to have influenced civilizations around the world. Well, this area that we're in is basically ground zero for where we have the most evidence for them anywhere around the world. And I think what some people might be like, well, are we really going to invade the Middle East over evidence that we can see anywhere else around the world? And the answer to that is No, because I think the Middle East has some of the most important ancient knowledge of that you can find anywhere in the entire planet. Yeah, I know there's ancient stuff in South America and through Baalbek, Lebanon, and up through Cambodia and India, and there's ancient history evidence everywhere. But what they don't have are ancient cuneiform writing tablets that carry on this incredible story that has been largely lost and has only remains in these little fragments. That's what the Middle East is. It's the record of the past that still exists, buried under layers of forgotten dirt and rock that have been laying there for thousands of years. And when those cuneiform tablets were discovered in the 1800s, it changed the entire way that certain researchers perceived the ancient past. And I say certain researchers because, like we know, Sam and Jeffrey, and I'll get your input here, is that this story that these cuneiform tablets are telling, and this story that these things like the Sumerian king list and the Eridu Genesis and Atrahasis about these ancient cities and gods and these bloodlines that kings that ruled here, that doesn't exist. People don't even know that's even around. And most people have never even heard of any of these ancient cuneiform tablets or ancient cities, right?
Yeah,
Without a doubt.
it's last time we talked, I kind of brought this up, but it's just like the more and more you study the Matrix, the more and more you just realize that was almost a doc more than just a fiction, right? I mean, like there's so much stuff. I always go back to when Neo meets the engineer, and the engineer's like, "Wow, you're different than the rest of them." And he's like, "Yeah, like the 11 before you," and how it's just basically we're not the first, and there's this whole group of things that as you starts from zero, grows up, and then something happens and crashes and burns. Now, before we get into it, Matt, is there any research that the people who start to manipulate all these civilizations and then eventually crash and burn them, are they the same people? Or is this a different, like, you brought up, what we would call reptilians almost. I don't know if those are your words, but when we think of them, that's what we think they are, this group, this subgroup this group that was created to control us, to keep us in line, to mine the gold or whatever the Anunnaki wanted us to do. Is this group always present in these civilizations, and right before the civilization crashes, we see them go underground and survive whatever nuclear war, whatever happens, and then they come back up? Is there any information that would let us know whether that it's the same people who are blowing it up all the time?
Well, let me make a few clarifications on my end in terms of some of the research that I've done. In terms of actually studying these cuneiform tablets, the first place I want to start is that none of them mentioned gold mining. Just to be clear, okay. I want the record to be straight, because I think it's important that just like others have tampered with history, it should be our responsibility to follow evidence and actually tell what it really says. And so if you read every single cuneiform tablet you can get your hands on, it does talk about needing to work here and clear river channels and basically be like laborers. Yes, it absolutely does say that. It says that was what we were made for, to basically labor in this physical reality here. So you bring up points like the Matrix and these different versions that have existed. Well, I can connect all those things with what's in cuneiform tablets. That's what's so amazing about it. And what that tells me is that the Wachowski brothers, or whoever is influenced in understanding movies like The Matrix, sisters, knew about this. Because let me tell you how that connects. In this tablet called The Legend of Etana, it clearly states in that the city of Kish was the very first city that was created after these catastrophes went through and wiped everything out. The reset, okay? The reset button, completely over again. And what Etana says is that he was chosen, not just that he happened to become king. He was chosen by these powerful gods and individuals to basically be the architect of the new world. And he was handed all these laws and rules for how to govern society, just like how to create a new version of the Matrix. That's exactly what that was. He was basically the designer and the archetype of the new world. And so before him were ancient cities that are mentioned in the Sumerian king list. And Jeffrey and I went over this on the previous podcast I just started called Mastermind Discussions, where we talked about Eridu and all these ancient cities that are mentioned. But those cities that are all mentioned in the Sumerian king list, they were all destroyed, wiped out, eliminated. All those bloodline kings and individuals, most of them were wiped out. And what happened was, the only remaining individuals that were survived, like you mentioned, going down into caves and trying to seek shelter from some of these catastrophes that occurred during the Younger Dryas, which is around 10 to 12,000 years ago. When those catastrophes occurred, whoever was alive in these bloodline ancestors that made it through, who were warned or whatever it was, they then created this entirely new version of our reality based on not their own ideas, but a relowering of kingship. That's the specific words that all of these tablets use, whether it's Legend of Etana or Eridu Genesis or Sumerian King List. It keeps mentioning this idea of how these moral laws and codes, this kingship structure, has to be relowered. And in fact, in the Sumerian King List, it says it over and over again. It'll say, Eridu fell, kingship had to be relowered to like the city of Bad Tabiria. And then that fell and had to be relowered to the city of Shuruppak. Over and over again, this model of our reality.
What does the word mean, though? That's my only question. What does it exactly mean? Relowering?
It means that everything gets destroyed or armies wipe out all of this structure to our reality, like governing structure with this hierarchy kingship structure, right? Where knowledge disseminates down. You have a king bloodline ruling at the top who's going to do what he's supposed to do based on guidance. Okay. That's how I guess I'll call that. And then that system of laws where, you know, people will be working and others set up laws to, you know, criminalize those who don't have a certain kind of behavior. That's what the structure of our reality is. It's based on certain laws and rules.
Isn't that the first line of the Sumerian Kings List, or one of them, when kingship was lowered from heaven?
Exactly. And it tells you that, no, we didn't come up with any of this stuff. It was lowered down by these Anunnaki gods who disseminated this information so that we would be designed in the image of the reality that they wanted. That's what that archetype in the Matrix is all about. That architect, he is the same as like the Anunnaki, but they use almost like an AI, like artificial intelligence to represent it by.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now, do you see any signs that something like that might be happening again?
Yeah, I mean, we keep going through these cycles. And if you look into Indus Valley civilizations, they called them the Yuga cycles. And if you go over the Hopi and Maya and Aztec, they talked about how the same cycles, these different ages of mankind seem to come where we have mankind rise up with knowledge and information, and then they get wiped out by some catastrophe, and then up again they go, and the same thing keeps happening over and over again. And what I've come up with in terms of, not me, but other researchers, and I agree with based on research and studying, is that we seem to have these cycles with the sun, where the sun will go through these solar cycles around every 10 to 12,000 years. And when that occurs, all hell breaks loose because of all the interactions it plays on our planets and on our sun, and how our Earth will be tilted and start wobbling it. And what happens when that occurs? Earthquakes all set off around the globe. You get volcanoes erupting. Weather patterns are really erratic and strange, and the Earth warms really, really hot before you get a collapse of ocean currents, and then you go into a mini ice age.
Oh my God. Are you talking about the polar vortexes shiftings? Is that what we're talking about here?
It's the north and south pole. It's, if you think of our planet as this balanced planet with a north and south pole, a magnetic field, and it's this very precise balance and wobble. And if you get an influence, this gravitational influence from our sun, if it goes through a solar maximum to a minimum, it emits tremendous amounts of energy. Every time it goes through one of those cycle changes, it always does the same thing. It emits this massive amount of energy, and that affects us in a very dramatic way, from melting all the ice caps to having pole shifts where you get a displacement of the crust and you have earthquakes and hurricanes everywhere and stuff.
An interesting side note, I mean, in this climate change conversation, very seldom, if ever, do they talk about the cycles, solar cycles, et cetera. It's all carbon, et cetera. Humans are the worst, carbon.
Jeff, that's why.
What's that?
Can't make money off that.
Well,
How do you
precisely,
make
my
money
friend.
off of
Exactly.
polar shifts?
No
That's,
money in curing cancer, I tell you that.
yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, dude. It's unbelievable. Okay, so I feel like I knocked you off course, Matt, that you had something you want to talk about, and I had to just make you talk about this other
Well,
thing.
Sam, you did say, I'm sorry, but you say, do these things happen again? I mean, like Matt was alluding to,
yeah.
these things occur through cyclical, through, I mean, as far as, Inky becomes, Neptune becomes Poseidon, becomes Odin, become, these individuals, these archetypal figures, or who are Mazda that appear throughout history. You just got to know the backstory to know, oh, this is the same biology of the same deity or the same entity.
Yes, dude. It's unbelievable. And like
So-
nobody studies any of it. And it's just
And then you wonder why they have you keeping up with the Kardashians and trampling people for Jordans.
So Sam, at the end of the stage of time that you have a copy of, I have a god table for what those names are for Enlil and Enki and Enlil throughout every major civilization that they were a part of, and that's how you follow and trace them. But to be clear, I want to just point this out because I didn't forget it. If you read the myth of Adapa, which Jeffrey and I just covered on Mastermind Discussions episode number 2, we read it in the translation. It mentions how Adapa, the first man that's created that's perfect, is considered the greatest of the Anunnaki. It says that he is greater than even them, and he mentions that he is them essentially. That's the whole point I really want to make here. These bloodline kings lived a very great amount of time, and they were very tall, but they still looked like us, right? That's because we are the Anunnaki. I don't believe that they're reptilian. I think references to them being reptilian would be in the sense that they've lost their whole right brain emotional side. So they're no longer like an emotional human being. It's more of a way to show that they have a mindset that's almost very driven towards a logical perspective, with losing almost their entire humanity, because the reptilian brain was the ancient left brain.
The R complex, they call it. Yeah.
well, I can understand. I don't know if I ever actually believed that they were like reptilians. I just kind of use that name so people know exactly what we're talking about. But yeah, I totally agree that man. It's just so interesting, dude.
So they are us. We are essentially in their image. We are them. And so when they were here, they essentially wanted to try to conquer reality and create a worker that they could replace them, so they wouldn't have to do anything in this physical reality. So we became like these gods who were forced to be in a lower realm. And I strongly encourage people, if they really want to read about that, go look into the Nag Hammadi Gnostic writings, specifically the Secret Book of John. And it talks all about how, just like I mentioned about how the first man was created too perfect, it exceeded even them. And because of jealousy, through what was known as Enlil was the demiurge and the controller of the material world, he banished mankind into this lower realm meaning the physical third dimensional reality where we don't belong, to force and trap us here in like an eternal struggle, like the Matrix.
Okay. So what you're telling me right now is that you always hear people like, well, this is a hell. Is this what you're telling?
Yeah.
Like, because I was going to ask you, what do you think we live on? My best friend in the world thinks we live on a flat earth. And like, I'm not here to disrespect anybody. If that's not what you believe in, who cares? We're talking about, what does Matt and Jeff, I think I know what Jeff believes in, but Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I can expand on that too. It might help you out a little bit. So what you're referring to, and I know what you mean, the whole confusion with flat earth started around this aspect of looking at our reality in a metaphysical nature. And the Gnostics called the physical reality the third dimensional plane. Okay, that's what they called it. But that doesn't mean that it's a flat surface. It means that dimensions are broken up into different planes, and they're divided by different subsets of energy. This plane just means that we're in this realm of the physical reality, okay? It doesn't mean that the physical version is flat.
Is this a dimension? Is that what you're talking about? We're talking dimension.
The third dimensional plane is just a certain dimension that we are forced to exist in, which keeps us trapped because we don't really belong here. We're supposed to be way more advanced than this.
Oh my
So that's the whole point of the Matrix, right? Neo, he's walking down the street. He sees everyone in business suits going by, right? And he's doing the same thing over and over again. He's like, something's wrong with this. And what he gets told essentially is that everything is just the Matrix around you. It's this artificially created reality where we're made to believe that we're just evolved apes and that we should exist in this survival of the fittest mentality to fight over each other and to just use up our lives in almost an endless way so that we can reincarnate over and over again to be trapped here. Because the only way out is if we can reach higher states of energy to break out of the system and leave. But these protectors, these orchestrators of our reality have designed it so that the deck is stacked, so that we exist in a state of reality that's ruled by chaos and war and deception, and we're forced to believe that we are supposed to exist in that, but it's all a trick.
Preach, brother, preach!
God, dude, this is
Straight up
shit, man. This is what you come here for.
And again, they've been obscuring this reality, not only now in our world, Sam, of geopolitical bullshit, but even going back, hundreds of thousands of years. They just don't want us to know how dope we are, man. And that's not to say like we're so awesome, but I mean, this notion of, Adapa and this original man, and then you go into this notion of the original sin. Wow, what happened there? We had this conversation with the serpent about eating the tree of life, and that moment condemned us supposedly. How dare us want to be enlightened human beings, et cetera, and then it's just absolutely crazy how they just invert.
What Jeffrey's saying, Sam, you're gonna love this. That's the whole point of the eagle versus the serpent. Is that Enlil was the ruler of the material world and Enki was the ruler of the spiritual realm of knowledge and wisdom. It's higher spirit and energy. And Enlil got very jealous about what we were. And so he trapped us in this material world to rule us through ignorance. But the serpent Enki, this in the Garden of Eden story, he didn't want us to remain here because he knew that we were this perfect creation that belongs in higher states. And so that's why that story exists, where we were given the knowledge of good and evil, because he wanted us to realize this trap that we exist in, so we can rise above it eventually.
But what happened subsequent to the original sin in the Garden of Eden? This begotten son had to be sent to absolve us for all of our sins because we're such fuck ups. And if you don't believe in this individual, well, eternal hell flame awaits you, my friend.
And dude, how many religions are just fighting over the power ranking of Jesus? Like that's almost what so much of this thing comes down is like.
Well, look at the Council of Nicaea, man. When actually the popes or whoever it was literally voted on the deification of Jesus, because before that he wasn't this necessarily son of God. It was through the Council of Nicaea in 4th century AD, I think it was, where they voted on essentially him being a god, and then hence all of your different publications of the new Bibles, et cetera, stating that.
Matt, where do the Anunnaki reside? Are they in this dimension, or are they from another dimension? Because now stuff's starting to click for me. Like, how do I work? I know, Jeffrey, you're not a flat Earth guy. I'm not. I don't know what we live on. That's my.
We're not flat Earth, Sam. I know we all love Eddie. I love Eddie, but come on.
No, but
he's not married to the ball.
But no, I'm not married to what we're told we live on.
No, I'm with that. Fuck, NASA's lied a shitload. I mean, basically the premise of these people lied. I get that. Yeah, hell yeah.
Do I believe in flat Earth? I hope it's flat Earth, just so I can do a million more episodes on it, or that I just vote for chaos in that aspect, intellectual chaos, not actual war and crime, but just to watch heads explode about what's going on. But you're
asking about the same question I kind of asked him when I was talking to him. Like, are the Anunnaki going to return? And then he was like,
but
basically,
from? Like, what?
No, I know, but listen, I know, but that's the whole thing. There's no really. Are they going to? When you start talking about multi-dimensional beings and multi-dimensional travel, it's not going from A to B. Are they going to come here to come here? They could. Are you going to be here or here? I mean, when you start talking about multi-dimensional travel, they could be here right now, but just not on that wavelength that we're able to see.
Jeff's dead on. That's exactly what the point is. They came here, and in the Atrahasis, it mentions that they were able to conquer mortality and reality itself. They became the rulers of reality. The Nag Hammadi has an entire chapter called "The Hypothesis of the Archons," and it states that they were able to. They're the Archons. They were able, which means rulers. They were able to conquer our reality and then create us in their image to do all their work in this physical world, and then die and live the same life over and over and over again until certain individuals can rise above and realize that this entire thing's an illusion and that there is a way out. There is a way to beat the system. And so that's how this works. They conquered reality, and like Jeffrey made a great point there. We perceive time as a linear thing. Like, right, we did a show 9 months ago, but is that in the past, the future? How does that work for them? The past and the future don't exist for them because space-time doesn't exist. It's simply just different points in this great circle of energy that exists. And so we're in this very skewed version of how we perceive reality. And to be clear, we perceive only a small little fraction of what actually exists all around us. We are the third dimension, and the fact that we can only perceive 7 colors in the visible light spectrum limits us to such a degree that we perceive this little tiny little viewpoint of what reality really is. But around us, we're essentially like these, you could call us like experiments that are in the middle of an experiment, and everyone's watching us, but we don't know that we're in an experiment.
We're sea monkeys. That's basically what we are. Sea monkeys in an aquarium.
Okay, well, Sam wanted to find out where the Anunnaki are from, right? Well, I've heard that the pyramids of Egypt, the Giza, all of them, that they were made by Egyptians, but there's water erosion on them that prove that they've been there longer than they claim. Who made these, Matt? Was it the Anunnaki? Did they live there? Were they part of it?
The water erosion, like that evidence was more distinct with the Sphinx. John Anthony West, Robert Chalk went over there and pretty much blew that out of the water on how this couldn't be wind erosion. I'm sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, so those civilizations are part of what's known as the lost civilizations. You could think of them as before the reset. That's how we could view all this, Sam. All these ancient structures, the ones we're about to go over in Iran, I believe they're all part of these ancient lost civilizations that were destroyed and then mashed together in this incorrect viewpoint of who built them. So in terms of the pyramids of Giza, it's incredible how things are named, right? The Great Pyramid is called Khufu's Pyramid because Khufu was a certain pharaoh that lived in Egypt, but there's no evidence anywhere that he built the pyramid at all, and yet they named it after him. That's what this whole thing is, the problem is. So I don't even call it Khufu's Pyramid. Just like in Chichen Itza, I don't call it El Castillo because that's the Spanish name they use to control our viewpoints of all of this. It's called Kukulkan's Temple. Let's set the record straight right now. And just like the Great Pyramid of Giza, that's what it should be called. It has nothing to do with Khufu. He is incorrectly given credit for creating. In fact, he hadn't been born for thousands of years. That's how skewed our version is. So who built them? The pyramids are part of this ancient, what's called megalithic structure. These massive, incredibly well-built structures that seem to have these harmonics with human frequency and our planet. And they're found all around the world. All over the world, from North and South America, Easter Island, all the way across Baalbek, Lebanon, right down through Egypt and up into the Mesopotamian area that we'll talk about, through the Indus Valley, like Kailash Temple in India, all the way through Angkor Wat over in Cambodia. We have this lost history that has been turned into a myth or lumped together with civilizations that had nothing to do with building them.
This is amazing, dude. So, and then this goes back to what we were originally going to talk about, which I still want to talk about, which is the rewriting of history, the destruction of evidence of a different narrative, which they don't want you to know. My mind's blown. So this is we're going to get into this. We're living in a different reality. There's different dimensions. This is a 3D dimension. It's a prison, let's say, for us to live in. I don't know why they have us here. We're like an experiment just to see how things would act. See, I always thought that, man. I would see people and I'm like, I'd see a person, right? And they would be like one of those super fat people at the store in one of those Little Rascals. And I was like, what if someone just wanted to see, like, if this person did this, this, and this, how their life would turn out? If someone did this, this, and this, how their life would turn out? And each one of us is our own little experiment on seeing how these variables what it would lead to.
Yeah, if things are governed a certain way, if you have a country, let's say, that has this American dream, and you're supposed to just enjoy sitting on the couch and eating snacks and enjoying just that doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna drink fluorification in my water from all the public water, and I'm gonna be dumbed down. And I know what's going on though. I'm aware and observant, but really most of us aren't. Most people, because we've been so focused on this materialistic survival of the fittest mentality, once people accumulate enough wealth and they could buy all this bad food that's advertised and throughout all our media, eating all this stuff that really affects us, we get very dumbed down. Our pineal gland gets calcified and closes up. That's our third eye. That's why all these things have been talked about throughout history, because there are these certain ways where you can keep the population in this state of stagnation, in this really lower energetic state. There's a great, people should look in, you're going to love this conspiracy, but during World War II, German and Soviet camps who had captured soldiers would make them drink fluorinated water. They would put fluoride in their water to calm them and make them into these dull individuals that'd be easy to maintain and easy to rule over. And so they would just make all the water fluorinated, and they would play with the different levels of fluorination to keep people in this certain dumbed down state. Because what happens is it's a neurotoxin, and it goes in and it shuts down your pineal gland, and it shuts down these certain aspects that allow us to be awake and aware. And so most people are deliberately, like you said, this experiment, deliberately kept in this state where they're not perceiving anything that's really higher all around them, and they're like in an illusion of reality, in a state of energy that's very low.
Wow, dude.
Docile and passive too. That was another, just like they're just like, just whatever. And again, you see it play out, dude. Black Friday sales. How are people killing not literally every time, but how are they willing to trample another human being for a 41-inch or 50-inch TV?
When things like the Roman Empire came through and wiped out all this ancient records of what really happened, there was a story that was essentially created, that was rewritten. When the Roman Empire, when Constantine founded Constantinople in Turkey, that became Istanbul today, they rewrote and created this certain doctrine of history that was in their perspective viewpoint that they wanted us to believe in. Because like Jeffrey pointed out earlier in the show, what the Romans figured out was if they could control the past, they could control the present, and they could write the entire narrative for how we would be perceived religiously in terms of spirituality and everything, how that could be corrupted like it was, and then also how we could perceive our past. And if that we were just a barbaric race and that's all that defines us. But really, there's this entire lost history that exists that's being deliberately stamped out so we don't know about it. So let's set the stage here so we can get into this. What happens if someone questions or challenges anything? They're immediately not this whole idea of patriotism and nationalism, where you can create this idea that we have to support and stand by everything that we're told, every individual that rules us, and that we can't ever question it or question what's governing us. And that's a perfect system, right? Because then people can jump all over you if you say things like you did, or anyone that questions certain things about the way that we're told that they are. And it's easy. And when I walk down the street and if I was to walk up to someone and talk about my work, most people would look at me like I had 3 heads and they would walk the other way, right? Because people have been so brainwashed into this certain version for their entire life that anything that challenges that version of reality that we've been told is instantly just pushed away and buried, because people aren't willing to accept and consider alternate pieces of information at all. But that's what the whole point of what we're doing today is, right? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I was just going to say, I listened to the show with Sam the other day, and I don't know if you guys got it completely correct, but you guys were asking about who was somebody that said that the Earth wasn't geocentric, and I think you guys said Socrates, or you said Socratic, but it was Galileo as well. But I mean, anytime you go against that official narrative of bringing new information to an existing paradigm, it's never met with open arms.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like, I live in Hollywood. I've been screaming about the Clintons and the Democrats and all that stuff for a long time, and people think I'm a crazy person. Now they're kind of calmed down because secretly they know I was right, But it's like, dude, during 2016, dude, I was seen as a giant whack job, and people got really angry, man. And I mean, people put hands on me, and
Really?
well, it wasn't like, listen, it was a tiny comic, but I mean, his hands were little puppet hands, but he still touched me.
I mean,
And it's just like, hey, dude, chill, brother.
even though we're all products of our environment, we all have our own confirmation biases, and unless challenged, people will go on with their lives just assuming what they believe is what it is. But honestly, Sam, whatever we're doing or what Sam's doing, it doesn't take long to realize that those are false realities that can easily be deconstructed. None of this stuff is theoretical. There's so much information out there to show, like, yeah, this is what happened. I'm sorry this doesn't fit with what you believe happened, but this is there. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
So, Matt, let's begin, dude. We saw, remember one time I saw that the Taliban was destroying ancient statues because they weren't Islamic. And then I'm like, well, the Taliban's pay, everybody's been funded by the U.S. government. So what's really going on with that? So wherever you want to begin, dude, I'm going to give you the floor just to go from A to Z and have a good time. And I'm going to try not to interrupt. And just because you just blew this dimension thing, kind of like put some pieces together for me, man. It's like how I can take the flat earth people, the multiple dimension people, and the Anunnaki people, put them all under one little thing. And that to me is what the gold is. So go on, brother.
Well, and the other reason that people that state that is because most of reality is measured through non-physical levels. So that's why some people say, like, there's no space and there's nothing out there, because of the idea that reality really is defined on a metaphysical level by like vibrating strings of energy. That's known as string theory. But that's how that works. That's how people can take that information and weave it into that none of space is real and that the earth is flat, because they're able to take some of the certain ways that information is perceived. So and that's what I want to lay the groundwork for, is in terms of, well, how do we perceive the Middle East? Most people have this perception of the Middle East as just a place where, go ahead and bomb them or some awful thing, when, people that are living there, what do they have to do with any of the governments that are supposedly, corrupt and evil that are ruling them? Well, this is the angle that I really want to show. This is that, look at how we had all these fake lies, all of this illusion for why we were going to invade Iraq, right? Weapons of mass destruction, all these things. And we opened up the show by talking about how one of the first things that happened was that the American soldiers were seen, and there's great photographs of it, actually, if you go look online, ransacking the Iraqi museum. And there are very detailed records that talk about it, actually. And I think some Iraqi individuals were really upset finding out about that antiquities were stolen. So what the heck's the point of that, right? Who wants some dusty old, bricks and stones and statues? Well, the problem is that region contains these cuneiform tablets and murals and all of these things that depict these ancient gods, and all of this information that goes far beyond the 6,000-year timeline that we're told. And ISIS, this group, this proxy terrorist group, who should have no interest in ancient history, because they're about just taking over regions and things like that. But somehow they're systematically going through and destroying all of these ancient sites. So let's try to bring this into perspective. Armies today with smartphones and all this stuff can't just go through and wreck country after country and just bulldoze and destroy their artifacts, right? People would see that. You would be like, why is so-and-so country doing that? Is appalling. The world would band together and try to help. But what if you just did sort of like the whole Kennedy thing? You hired outside so it wouldn't make you look like you're the perpetrator. That's exactly what happened. Is ISIS is essentially this, in my opinion, is this proxy army that was created for multiple reasons. To create a war on terror. To create a war on terror and to create evil and this idea of scaring people, but also to be like your hired guns, these dogs that you could send out to just destroy whatever you want to. You create the war zone so that nobody can be in there, and then you just allow them to go through and destroy it all. And then at the end, you're like, oh, look at those terrorist groups did to all these ancient sites. You know, that they're so terrible, but really, the individuals like the CIA and aspects of the government are behind the entire operation. It's
so true, dude. It's so true. It's like, get rid of everybody, and then you can just have freedom to go do. You know, every time they assassinate a leader at the ISIS, I'm like, what, the U.S. government? That's just one less employee check they got to write. You know? It's just, that's all it is.
Well, and get going back, and we're gonna get into it. Like, okay, again, nothing is new under the sun. We're doing it in 2020 and the last 20 years or whatever. But Alexander did it in Persepolis. The Romans did it in the Library of Alexandria. What the fuck are they hiding, and why are they continuously doing this? I mean, when I say the Persepolis, it just sounds like just another city. Ladies and gentlemen, go look it up. This supposedly ancient, archaic, or whatever city, dude, huh? Pressopolis. Persepolis. I mean, you could find just digital reconstructions. You could see how it is now. You could see Palmyra. You could see all these different cities in Syria, the gates of Nineveh, these places that they've absolutely destroyed. Go to that one
right there. Yep, that one.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Matt, go for it. I mean, but again, nothing is new under the sun. We're obscuring this information in 2020, and they were doing it with Alexander. They were doing it with his father, Philip II of Macedon. Like, again, this has been going on for a long time, bro.
So go ahead and look up the Gate of All Nations, and I want you to pull it up, and we can talk about that for a minute. Talk about Nineveh and show examples of Nineveh, Iraq, and show Palmyra, Syria, just to get an idea of what is going on essentially. But these locations,
hold on.
Go ahead.
You come back and like in a week or two and do another extension on this like we've done before, because we're just cooking with gas. I needed to get this other discussion done, but we're going to have to do another part two of this discussion.
I think they would call that part 3.
I like that guy, Sam. I like him.
That's why he's an intern. The show.
That's why he's an intern.
Okay, go on, man. I'll shut up. Everyone's listening. Like, shut up, Sam. Let him talk. Go.
Yeah. So go ahead and start by pulling up the Gate of All Nations XG, and we'll just want to show an example of this. Yeah. So, this is Persepolis. Okay, this is Persepolis, Iran, and it's basically one of the oldest ancient cities that exist in the entire area. Now, what I want to get at to show, well, how do you know that it's so old? You know, we're told that it was basically built during the Achaemenid Empire in 550 BC, right? That's not that old. Well, that's part of this entire skewing of ancient history that I want to clarify and really show. Now, look at those columns. Look at how enormous they are. Now, I don't know if XG has a picture of people. Yeah, go ahead and grab the picture above with a person. Right there. Look at how enormous those are. All right. We're talking about stone slabs that are more than 20, 30 feet tall in some cases. Okay. But what's the problem with that? Well, during this time period, these civilizations we're told, only had Bronze Age tools. If it fits into that narrative that we're told of 550 BC. Okay, that's the important point to make. If they were built in 550 BC, then those civilizations that were around only had Bronze Age tools. And that's true because we had a reset after these catastrophes, and a lot of the ancient knowledge and tools that were used back then were lost. So these cities were lumped together with incorrect empires and dynastic pharaohs that built them, like Khufu building the Great Pyramid of Giza. He had nothing to do with it. That came way later, just like Persepolis. This is an ancient city that has the same characteristics we find all throughout the Mesopotamian area. It's this idea where we find these massive megalithic stone blocks, just like I told you, with very precise cut work, with tools that would be impossible using just Bronze Age, okay? Because they wouldn't be able to cut those stones. They're too hard to be able to use those types of tools with. It proves that they were built with more advanced technology that doesn't even fit into the timeline we're given. Now, when you look into look at it when we were going to invade Iran and go in and destroy them, right, during all this fiasco, what was the phrase that was used?
Cultural sites.
We're going to attack cultural sites. What do you mean you're going to attack cultural sites? What does that have to do with military targets?
Ah, dude.
Think about that. It was like they wanted to try to go in and take care of these cultural sites to wipe them out, just like ISIS was doing throughout Iraq and Syria. It's the same thing, except the problem was they don't have ISIS in Iran. See what I mean? So they're not able to hire those goons to go do it. So they were trying to lump this into some kind of an airstrike thing to try to wipe out these cities that are much, much older, that have proof and evidence that shows that the Anunnaki, Ahura Mazda, and these other gods we're going to talk about were part of all of this lost history that we've been turned into a myth now.
Oh my God. He did say that, these cultures.
Yes.
And I'm like, what the fuck is it? Why is he hidden?
And you can't use ISIS because they're their enemy. And who was Soleimani supposedly working with to take out ISIS? And then we go and take out Soleimani.
Persepolis was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. Cultural World Heritage Site. And they were mentioning these cultural sites. They were talking about wiping out, just like the Roman Empire did, just like ISIS was doing. It's the same playbook, but just trying to twist it around in a different way. Because those cities, and I want to give a couple of statistics really quick. The city of Persepolis is located 37 miles northeast of the city of Shiraz in the Fars province in Iran. Now, what's crazy about it is this is a massive city. I mean, we're talking about a city that's 125,000 square meters, okay? It's this huge ancient city with these massive megalithic blocks that were impossible to be created with Bronze Age tools. And they show all these Anunnaki gods. And what they show specifically is this god Ahura Mazda. It's in this winged disc. XG, why don't you go ahead and pull up Ahura Mazda really quick for me? It's Ahura Mazda.
And if you can, you guys go check out. There's a 3D replication, if you will, of Persepolis, and what Matt's saying, how huge it was. I mean, dude.
The ancient god that was the Persian version of Enki, that was basically ruling all this area, was called Ahura Mazda. And the name Mazda was the car company took that name. And that's where they got it from. Just like, remember I mentioned the name Subaru means Pleiades, and Nike was an ancient Greek god. All of these names that we think are just nothing, they are all connections back to these ancient past.
Is the Saturn car company around anymore?
No, they're not. Unbelievable.
So
unbelievable.
Now, And so what I want to bring up now is XG, grab that picture of the Behistun inscription. I want to read this and really blow your mind in terms of what it talks about and what it gets into. Keep going right there. Okay, so this is really cool. North of the city of Persepolis, okay, and this is an ancient city that was ruled by this great king called Darius the Great. Okay, Darius the First. Now, Darius's first son was Xerxes. Does that ring any bell from 300? Yes. How Xerxes was attacking the 300 Greek army and they were battling. Xerxes was the son of Darius. Now here's an image from what's known as the Behistun inscription. This is absolutely mind-blowing because I want to give a couple stats about this because it relates directly to Persepolis, okay? Darius was the ruler of this entire region, okay? And he created these murals and cities all over the place in Iran. Now, his god was Ahura Mazda, which you can see at the top in the winged disc flying. Now, Darius is on the left. Look at the far left, the individual who's stepping on top of someone else. Now, notice how much taller he is than all the rest of his servants. He was a great bloodline king that created this mural called the Behistun inscription. Now, the Behistun inscription is found 330 feet up on a sheer cliff. A sheer cliff. And it's carved right out of the rock itself. Bronze Age tools could never even get close to accomplishing this. It would be impossible to do this. So up on this sheer ledge, this massive mural was created that's 50 feet by 82 feet wide, okay? And it has this mural of King Darius with Ahura Mazda above him. And in it has this ancient Akkadian writing that took hundreds of years to even translate. So there were individuals coming over and rediscovering this from the locals and trying to go up on these massive ladders to try to access this, and they couldn't translate it. They had no idea what it said. So finally, years later, in 1838, they were actually able to translate this for the first time. And what it says is really amazing because it really keys into the Sumerian king list. It carries into Eridu Genesis and all these different places.
Wow.
So I want to read the translation from this because it's really important for us to understand what really happened in the past. The whole idea of how our reality can be ruled through certain rules and laws to become what we think of as the Matrix. This is where it all came from. So this is what it says on this incredible mural that's up on a sheer cliff. King Darius says, "That is why we are called the Achaemenids." That was their empire name. "From antiquity, we have been noble. From antiquity has our dynasty been royal. 8 of my dynasty were kings before me. I am the 9th. 9 in succession we have been kings. By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I am king. Ahura Mazda has granted me the kingdom." So just like Legend of Atana, where he is given kingship and told to rule over the people and become the architect, Darius is the exact same thing. He's one of these bloodline ancestor kings that was chosen to rule over the entire region. And so
Well, and when you mention Ahura Mazda, just to say this is that lineage, it's originally Ahura Mazda is Inky.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So it was like their ancient god, essentially. Okay. Now this is even more interesting in my opinion. During World War II, when we were over in this area, if you look this up, the Behistun inscription was severely damaged because American soldiers were told to use it for target practice. They were told to shoot at it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's what they were doing. That's what the ISIS was doing with these giant statues. They were just, I mean, dude, isn't that something that they said happened with the nose of the Sphinx too? They shot at it. Like,
Yeah.
oh shit. Oh man. It's
Well, the Sphinx was recarved. It was completely turned into this entirely other thing. If you look at an image of the Sphinx, the head is way too small proportionally for the body. It doesn't make any sense. It's because they came in, they found this massive statue of a great lion, and they recarved it into a pharaoh because the dynastic pharaohs of Egypt, Khufu and all these other pharaohs, Tutankhamun, they tried to take credit for all of these structures in Egypt, and they had nothing to do with it. That's why.
And the lion, and at the time, like XG was talking about earlier, at the time of the Sphinx's actual construction, it was facing the constellation of Leo, which is 10,500 BC, as they extrapolated from the timeline of all this other stuff, as well as when there could have been water in that region. But yeah, dude, so crazy.
Does the Ahura Mazda person, does that have to do anything with Quetzalcoatl?
Well, those are part of those same types of gods that were ruling over these civilizations all over the place. And Quetzalcoatl, if you connect Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, the influences of the Maya and the Aztec, you get a connection back to this Egyptian figure named Thoth, and how these beings that seem to have conquered reality, they're now playing the role of just creating these empires and civilizations based on their influences. And so they're just battling back and forth. And I want to give you an example. So in Iraq, you had a region where their god that was portrayed, go ahead and pull up Ashur. Their god that was portrayed in Iraq, it's Ashur. That's not Ahura Mazda in Iraq. That was Ashur. See? It's different. That's because that's Enlil. That's Enlil. It was Ashur versus Ahura Mazda. So Ahura Mazda was the Persian god of Enki, who was ruling over that region, and Ashur was Enlil, who was ruling over essentially Iraq area. So they were just how can a kingship be destroyed? How do these cities keep falling and empires being destroyed? They were just battling back and forth over and over again for supremacy.
I want to go back to the beginning of this conversation when Sam was talking about how he uses emoji as the serpent. Enlil is the eagle. Enki is the serpent. So when we talk about Ahura Mazdas, for these new people who are just listening, Ahura Mazda, when you go back to the original Sumerian text, is Enki. So like again, these deities show up constantly throughout history in just different iterations.
Oh my. It's
So the name Behistun, it's Mount Behistun. It means place where the gods dwell. And just like all around the world, it seems like most of these ancient sites are built right into mountains. Okay. And you brought up the idea of stargates and gateways. Well, you look all around the world, from Amaru Gate down in Peru in Bolivia down near Lake Titicaca, all the way over to Petra, Jordan, and these gateways in Saudi Arabia that you've seen in the middle of the desert on these islands of rock, all the way through Kinis Rock in Iraq, right up to the Behistun inscription in Persepolis. There are all these tombs and gateways, these giant doorways that are just carved right into the mountain itself.
They're in the middle of the fucking mountains.
Matt, I'd heard that there's stuff at the Grand Canyon that people don't talk about. That there are tombs there, giants carved into the sides of the mountains that nobody talks about. That they try to tell you that it was a glacier that did this, that carved this out, when it most likely, or could be, excuse me, if we're going to go down where Matt's way of thinking, which I agree with, by the way, that this was carved out by ancient civilizations and ancient gods.
Well, and the natives who got the kick down information, the Hopis. I mean, I'm sure Matt will probably get into it, but yeah, I mean, it's those lineages who came from that Thoth area, you know, the Emerald Tablets, that area down in Mexico, who spread out. The information was there.
Well, so to be clear, the Grand Canyon was, based on evidence I've looked at, that was created by natural forces of erosion. But that doesn't mean that ancient civilizations didn't find that and live in there and use those areas to build caves and to build tombs, like you said. And there's definitely evidence, because the Hopi, these cultures of the Anasazi, these Native American cultures that are down there, there's evidence that they're much older than we're told as well. So it's not just these Mesopotamian civilizations and Egyptians and Inca and Aztecs and Maya, but also right up into the Southwest United States, into the Mississippi Valley. Those civilizations, those indigenous cultures, are much older than we've been told, and they had a lot more knowledge and know-how on how to construct certain things than we were told. The Hopi tell us their ancient stories specifically state that they were led into caves to seek shelter during a time of great catastrophe and deluge deep in these mountains. And that was the only reason, the way they survived, showing you that if they knew stories of the flood, then it means that they were around before it. And that's what this whole thing
ant
is.
people, right? Ant people?
Yeah, that's right. That's what they called them. They called them the ant people. Good one.
And I'm right here in the Mississippi Valley, man. I got Cahokia like 50 miles away, you know, barely 50 miles away from me, and these kind of mound builders. But you come up the Mississippi Valley, you got Lake Egypt, you got Cairo, you got Memphis over in Tennessee. Like, why are we hearing these kind of throwbacks to these, or these names of Egyptian kind of references in this area, you know, kind of the new world, if you will? I think, like Matt was saying, like there was people here, you know, I hear about hieroglyphs in different caves here up the Mississippi Valley. So it's like, again, man, things are just always getting older and older. And if you follow Matt, he's always posting stuff how things are getting older and older. They're finding new stuff. So it's just like, man, we just got to do the research. The information's there. But yeah, without a doubt, they're lying to us. Let's at least establish that.
And I want to get back and to connect to what we were saying with the Matrix and get back to Iraq. And I think that you're really going to like this. You asked about Nebuchadnezzar, the name of the ship in the Matrix, okay? Nebuchadnezzar was an ancient king of Babylon in Iraq, okay? And he's famous for capturing Jerusalem and essentially destroying it and creating a great empire. So why would they use just a name that didn't matter? Clearly they knew about this ancient empire ruler of Babylon, and Babylon was one of these cities that was fought over and eventually became ruled over by the god Marduk, who I believe was one of the great designers of the reality that we're in now, along with Enlil.
Why do you think that?
Well, you learn about how these different ages of when mankind was ruled are based on these zodiac ages. And it represents, the earth goes through this period of where it will face a certain set of constellations based on this slight tilt and wobble of the planet. So the earth is not perfectly straight up and down. it has a slight wobble to it. And the ancients knew that, and they called them the zodiac ages. Okay, and those ages last 2,100 years. So when Jeffrey brought up how we know that the Sphinx was really a lion, what the reason they know that is because they compared the Great Pyramid of Giza with the King and Queen's chamber and the Sphinx, the way that it's facing, back when we were in a different age, and they were able to line all those different astronomical observations up perfectly to this time period that's either 12,000 years ago or potentially even 36,000 years ago. So we go back so much further than we're told, and it's all connected to evidence, basically.
Like Graham Hancock said, dude, we're a civilization with amnesia, bro.
I couldn't agree more, dude.
Fuck.
I think it's such a much more interesting discussion.
And again, like we started with the bookend of it, they were doing it, however many thousands of years ago, tens of thousands, and they're doing it now. Just all these false narratives that us, people who try to be enlightened, have to deconstruct. But you got so many people, not to get into the whole red pill, blue pill thing, Matthew, but you got so many people who are so blue pilled up and just like willing to just accept everything. We become the crazy people who actually want to question it and critically think and maybe deconstruct the narrative that's been told to us.
So interesting.
I want XG to bring up. I gave him some pictures of Nineveh because we're in Iraq now. We're talking about that. I just want to show yet again another one of these sites. Nineveh, in my opinion, is probably the most important ancient site in the world because Nineveh was the location of the Royal Ashurbanipal Library, which was the largest collection of these cuneiform tablets ever recovered. There it is right there. Jeez. Now, this is an old picture.
Yes.
This is what it looked like after they reconstructed it long ago, in the 1980s or whatever it was, before ISIS destroyed it. That's right. This city was destroyed by ISIS. And then you can go to the next picture to show it on the left there. There it is right now. So these are pictures of what ISIS did to Nineveh. Now, who cares, right? It's just an old ancient city.
Right.
This was the location, again, of where more cuneiform tablets were found than anywhere else on Earth. This was the Royal Ashurbanipal Library. And those tablets, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and Enuma Elish, they provide us with this narrative of the past and these kings and rulers is completely different than we're told. Mentioning the Anunnaki and these stories of mankind's origins and creation here, having to toil for the gods in this physical reality. The whole story that I just told you all comes from here. This is where it comes from. And so for them to destroy it is very symbolic, in my opinion. It really, to me, is just like the burning of the Library of Alexandria, except they're just having a lot more cunning, clever means to accomplish it today than they used to back then.
No different. No different.
So they're trying to get rid of those artifacts. Where does the Ark of the Covenant show up? Is that part of it? Are they going after that too?
Well, that was an Ethiopian ancient, essentially, artifact or relic, you could call it. But we don't even know where that is. And more importantly, the things that maybe contain the most information, we never even could find. Because I'm going to give you an example. When they uncovered in the Royal Ashurbanipal Library, there was 30,000 cuneiform tablets recovered. So there are thousands of these cuneiform tablets that have recovered, and less than 100 have ever been translated. Less than 100.
Less than 100. That's insane.
Do we think they're at where in the Vatican downstairs?
Well, that's the point I want to make. Less than 100 that we know of. Yeah. Less than 100 that we're told. They most likely have translated all of them. And then most of them, that because you never hear about the ones that don't get translated, right? Yeah. Oh, they found 10,000 cuneiform tablets, but these 5 are fine. Thank you. Yeah. But what about all the other 25,000? Well, they're in the Vatican archives and they're kept under secure lock and gate because who knows what they say. If we think that the ones that I'm reading are juicy, I can only imagine all the things that were ransacked from Alexandria and the Ashurbanipal Library all the way over to when the conquistadors came over and ransacked the Aztec, the Maya, and the Inca. They stole all their ancient writings and stuff too. So we basically had this attempt to control the narrative by stealing all the information, then only providing us with these little bits that we fight over and think are just a myth.
Oh my God.
That's what frustrates me so much about modern day, how we we're all going at each other about all this nonsense and political stuff and right, left, and red, blue, all of it. But it's just like, it's all part of that design of like divide and conquer, and, you know, just the dumbing down of society, you know, and just keeping people almost as ignorant as possible and worried about things. And again, keeping
it's
up.
amazing. Like I want to read a quick quote. If you go look up Persepolis and you read about it, the archaeological experts right now admit, and this is a direct quote I want to read, the function of Persepolis remains quite unclear. Why? Because it doesn't fit in to this Neolithic version look at ancient human history, because it predates that. I think that I would go as far to say that almost all of these ancient sites are older than we're told, but some of them are much older than we're told. I think the entire narrative of human history has to be rewritten, but it's not just that these sites are older. Fine, they're older, but the whole idea is that our entire story is different than we're told. Our purpose is different than we're told. Our origins are different than we're told. Everything is basically this deception, this lie, to make us believe that we exist in this different reality than we really do.
I'm saying this linear nonsense that we were so simple before, but now we're a bunch of idiots with smartphones and we're so advanced. That's so nonsense, especially in the face of all of this contrary information, which is right in front of our face. That's what's so weird. Some of it's hidden, but a lot of this is right there.
I just think there's more to these wars. I don't even think it's about oil. I
mean, that might be a part of it. I mean, honestly, those guys, you know,
there's multi-purposes for all this. It's not just one reason.
But I just think the real reason. I mean, do we export more oil than we import now at this point? Like, why? It's just
the whole function of empire is to expand empire, and as we've seen, they will do nothing to keep from doing that, man.
That's what it is. These are empires fighting, and this is the old guard that doesn't want to let go. It doesn't want to give up, and that's why it's all designed around just these massive pharmaceutical artificial compounds for our medicine to sicken us. Why all of our energy is composed of these polluting substances, like creating plastic all over our planet. It's all part of the same system where these orchestrators of our reality, these corporate elites that control our banking world and our wars, they want to keep us in this certain type of mentality and reality where they're making tons of money, and we're kept in this state where they can destroy the natural world and disconnect us from it in our history, so that we feel like we're just like a lost, Darwinian ape that is supposed to just give up his whole life.
Like Sam said, and we've said many times, dude, the Matrix is more of a documentary than anything. And you see the picture that I used to have it on my cover photo, Morpheus holding up the battery. That's all we are, is just fuel to the machine. I've said that so much. I feel like I'm repeating.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we're just
absolutely.
fuel for this machine that they've created here that's based on lies and deception, and none of it's real.
Well, what is, hold on, I'll get to you. How do we get out of this matrix?
You just have to simply realize that religion was a basically corrupted version of what used to exist before, known as the old religion. And that was based on the idea of understanding our consciousness and energy, and that we are this physical body that you see in front of you is just this vessel for us to experience this physical reality, and that we are actually energetic conscious beings that are eternal. And that's why we keep getting reincarnated over and over again and stuck here, because we're in this loops that's forced to be here until we can ascend our physical body to reach our mental and spiritual state, and then break out of the whole thing. That's what Enki was trying to teach us, is that we essentially are beings that are far more superior than we've been made to believe, and that we're trapped in this materialistic world, fighting over each other and war and deception and materialism to just get more stuff, when really none of that matters at all. And that's why ancient civilizations for all over the world didn't have that as a focus. They didn't care about that because they realized that it was just an illusion.
We have to do more into that. I need to figure out how to break out of this matrix. I need to do a whole what do I gotta do? Eat right, take Krav Maga.
But again, asking the question of like, how do you change it? I mean, again, like anything, and I think I said this on whatever show I did the other day. Your solution to a problem is almost pointless unless you know the premise of your problem and recognize that it's real. You can't change shit unless you recognize you've been lied to. And again, that belies that the older you get, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It belies this larger question of like, once you realize you've been lied to, it's like, oh shit, now what? And what else have I been lied to about? And then the larger question of like, what do I do about it now? Once you realize how deep the rabbit hole goes on the depths of the deception.
But really, what can you do in terms of, you can't just go out tomorrow and ascend. Right. We're in a system. We're in a system here that is, there's so many constructs that are built into the system that you're going to be cast out of society if you try to follow these Gnostic ancient civilization teachings. Look in the Kabbalion, look at the Gnostic teachings, look at the Emerald Tablets, look at all the Hermetic writings that have been done.
Oh, we gotta do an episode on this, dude.
They all basically just tell us the same thing, is that we are tricked by the material world. And that keeps it.
And like what happens to all of them, from your Socrates to your Galileo to your John Kennedy or anybody to let you know the fix is in. What happens to them? Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, they get taken out.
The Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, they just found out that it might be an ancient treasure map to some other stuff. They thought the Sea Scrolls had religious shit in it. No, they're thinking it's a map to some stuff that they hid before they got invaded. So they knew that they were going to get invaded, and they hid all their stuff in somewhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's supposed to be like a little
time capsule.
A time capsule.
Yeah. He's right. No, I want to expand on what he said. Actually, that's great. So when you learn about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, all these ancient Gnostic writings, they were all deliberately buried and put into caves. Yeah. So when they found the Nag Hammadi scriptures. Yeah. In 1945, they found the Nag Hammadi scriptures. These Egyptians were walking along the Nile, and they found a cave, and they dug it all out, and they found these ancient Gnostic writings. What were they doing burying them? Because they knew that those writings were being sought for destruction by the Roman Empire. And so the only way to protect them would be to hide them for the future, when people like us can have more freedom of information to be able to read them, be like, oh, so that's the truth of the past.
Is this possibly why they buried this huge megalithic structure, which screws over the dates of what Göbekli Tepe? Come on.
Yeah, so Göbekli Tepe is an ancient astronomical site in Turkey that was deliberately buried as well, because they realized that the only way to preserve this stuff is to bury it for a future time when it can actually be heard and understand.
Oh my God.
We need to all do ayahuasca together.
Dude, I'm sober, but I do believe that.
That's not a drug. That's a ceremony, dude.
Those plants, all psychedelics do the same thing. This will make you happy. The whole purpose of them is they're here. I think purposely they're here, by the way. They're here to free us, to take us out of the matrix, to see the truth. That's the whole purpose. They're here to reset our mind so that we think differently, so we don't become trapped eternally in this illusion.
You know,
when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are. Infinite, William Blake.
The trick is, though, you have to still play the game, but you can't get lost in it.
Yes,
that's the great trick.
The game is everything. Now we have a friend of ours named Jessa Reed, who is a wonderful human being. She had a bad crystal meth problem, went on a deep run, and literally said she was visited by people who told her that you have to learn to play the game.
That's the thing. I've had people message me that told me, hey, your book really changed me. I just went out and I live out in the woods in a tent now. I love my life. I'm like, whoa. Oh. You know, I didn't try to say to do that.
That would have been me at like 21, 22, dude. I tell you what.
Because because the system has been so designed around all these constructs, you have to still play it. But when you don't get lost in it, you can find ways to get to the next level, getting knowledge and changing your health. And I guess you could do it on the down low a little bit, so that people, you're not going to be sitting in your office meditating and, sitting in the middle of a room or anything, but find ways around it. When you have moments of free time, instead of watching TV, go just search the internet for information, but have an objective mind about what you're looking for and about all the deceptions out there.
Well, and I've always felt, and again, we do. I mean, it's 7 billion people. It's, you can't fight City Hall kind of thing. But it's like, again, in my opinion, dude, the reason why the world is so jacked up is largely a part because of us. Silence is acquiescence, and when we acquiesce to this system and all this stuff, even though you can't know what you don't know, but we allow and we participate in this when we allow it to happen. These wars that go unchecked, just all of it, from the pharmaceutical company to the food being fucked up. All of it. I mean, we could just sit here and list this stuff forever, but we participate in it because, again, it's true. It's pragmatic. We have to play the game, but it's almost our playing the game, which is allowing this stuff to persist.
Well, my whole thing, Jeffrey, is if we get so lost in the results, that's how we go crazy. And we have people screaming like crazy cat ladies on videos about the world going back. So the best thing we do is what everybody on this show does, except for Johnny, but everybody else does, which is get the word out by doing our podcast. We all have great podcasts, and we all get the word out, and that's our job, is to spread the knowledge the best that we can. And
honestly, when we go back to the astrological shift that's happening, we're shifting from paradigm or from Pisces to Aquarius, and we're all a part of this. Each of our show, like you said, extending this information, giving these alternative versions of this alternative modes of thought to people that ultimately in the aggregate is going to build up and hopefully start to change people's minds, because you're not going to get it from CBS or Fox or, the mainstream media. I mean, this, again, I hate to use the word truth. I don't like that word, but we're definitely dropping truths that people need to look into. Don't just take our word for it, but go check it out for yourself, man.
Couldn't agree more.
Well said.
Real quick, Matt, final thoughts as we wrap it up here, because I know you got a jam. What are your final thoughts? And will you come back? Because I want to talk about all the lost books that they don't want us reading and that people don't know about, that they buried, like, let's say, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch. Is that the book you said, Jeff?
Yeah, and the Nag Hammadi is an awesome one.
Yeah, so I want to go over these books and what they represent and what they might tell us.
Well, and the fact that 30,000 or however many that Matt said are there, but only we're scratching the surface of however many that have been actually deciphered and decoded.
Yeah, so it's like 3 different categories, I'll call it, right? Just to be clear. There's like ancient Egyptian books, okay? The Book of the Dead, right? That's an ancient Egyptian book. Then there's Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets. Then we have Gnostic writings, which is basically after Egypt, there was a group called the Gnostics who tried to take the Egyptian knowledge and carry it on. And then this is where the Roman Empire came in and then wiped that out. So you think about it, all this is Mesopotamian knowledge was disseminated and brought to essentially Egypt. Some even say that it potentially came, and I believe that some of it obviously came from places like Atlantis, long ago when it was destroyed. It's just disseminated knowledge, and stories were brought down by different cultures. The Gnostics were the latest ones to carry that on, and then essentially the Druids were a subset of that. But that's it. After those groups were wiped out and destroyed, and now what we have now, we're essentially picking up the pieces and trying to put together this puzzle that's been scattered all over the place deliberately. And that's what I essentially see us as objective researchers of truth here. I think it is truth if you can take tablets and stories from all over the world and combine them together and find the same information over and over again. You can find those patterns that lead you towards truth, I think.
Well, and speaking of the Druids, man, as we celebrate St. Patrick's Day coming up, look at the Druids and how and why that, like Matt was just saying, the last vestige of the Druids information was being kicked out of Ireland by St. Patrick, and understand why that happened and how we celebrate it.
He was being tasked by the Roman Empire.
And we celebrate it.
I'm telling you, brother, the Vatican is the source of dark arts and the Jesuits, the black nobility. Rome never fell. It just rebranded itself. Why have armies everywhere when you could just have churches? And all these organized crime, all the intelligence services are probably controlled by the Jesuits, and all, at least in North America, in Western culture, all the crime organizations tend to have Catholic backgrounds, and so I mean it's all the same.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave, ladies and gentlemen.
We gotta do another episode ASAP sometime. I'll hit you guys up to see your availability. You guys know about the Conspiracy Farm, one of the best in the business, dude. I always say you listen to Tinfoil Hat, you dip your toe, you ride your training wheels, and then when you want to go on some deep dives, you go to podcasts like the Conspiracy Farms. They give you the good stuff, okay? And Matt, tell us again about this new podcast you're doing, because I need to check this out. I love Jeffrey's podcast. I didn't know you had your own new cool Is it a new one, or has it been around?
Yeah, I started a new podcast called Mastermind Discussions,
Oh,
because it's the idea of the mastermind is when you get individuals together that are like-minded, you can bounce ideas back and forth and you can reach a higher thought process. And that's the whole idea behind this. And Jeffrey joined me for episode 2 of the second one that's ever come out, and we dug into Eridu and some of the ancient cities that are mentioned throughout Mesopotamia. And I just want to say, Jeffrey and Sam, it's been a real honor to talk to you guys. I always appreciate it. And for anyone that's interested, my YouTube page is Matthew LaCroix, LaCroix, and my website is thestageoftime.com.
All right, brother. It's been great. Thank you guys so much. Johnny,
Thank you, Sammy.
Please check out Matt and Jeff's podcast. And I couldn't ask for better fans and better listeners in the world. We love you very much. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Next episode is going to be another killer just like this one. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.